Welcome to lesson 1.5. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about proving trig identities. Now, before we get into that, let's actually come up with a few more trig identities that we need to have in our toolbox. Now, so far in our past lessons, we have done the quotient identities, which is the tangent equals sine over cosine and cotangent equals cosine over sine. And we have also talked about the reciprocal identities, that secant is 1 over cosine, cosecant is 1 over sine, cotangent is 1 over tangent. We're going to add to that now using the Pythagorean identity that we've already learned. Now, we learned this one a couple lessons ago, so we're going to start by manipulating this one to get some alternate forms. Here's what I mean by that. If I take this one and I subtract sine squared to each side, I get a new version of the equation. So my new version is cosine squared of theta equals 1 minus sine squared of theta. Then, if I go back to here and I do that again, but now I do it with the cosine squared, I get another new version of the equation. And those are two different forms of the same Pythagorean identity. Meaning, if I ever see a cosine squared, I can replace it with a 1 minus sine squared. Or vice versa. If I ever see a 1 minus sine squared, I can replace it with a cosine squared. And same thing with this form. Now, we're also going to do one more thing to this Pythagorean identity. We're going to take this Pythagorean identity and do one more manipulation. This first part of the manipulation, I'm going to take everything in this Pythagorean identity and divide everything by cosine squared. Now, because I divided everything by that, I didn't actually change it. Now, let's see what we've got. Cosine squared over cosine squared gives me 1. Sine squared over cosine squared is going to give me tangent squared. And 1 over cosine squared is going to give me secant squared, using those quotient and reciprocal identities. And here's a new version of the Pythagorean identity. Meaning, I can also come up with my alternate forms. So the first alternate form, let's minus 1 to both sides. So I get tangent squared of theta equals secant squared of theta minus 1. Or I could subtract tangent squared to each side and get 1 equals secant squared of theta minus tangent squared of theta. And that gives me the two other alternate forms of this new Pythagorean identity version. So what I would like you to do is find the last version and its two alternate forms. Do that by, instead of dividing everything by cosine squared, divide everything by sine squared. And write what you get right here. Then subtract the things you need to find the two other alternate forms. Pause the video, try to come up with those on your own, and then come back to check and see how you did. Let's check your work. Here's what I got for the 3. They don't need to be in the same order, you just need to have those 3 there. Now, these 9 identities will also be on your memory test, so you do need to know all of these, in addition to those quotient and reciprocal identities. Now, what we're going to be doing for the rest of this lesson is using all the identities we've learned so far, plus a healthy dose of algebra from our 1050 to prove identities, to verify identities. We will talk about the process for how that works and some tips and tricks to do it in the next video.